Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this webinar about mental health, converging tech, pharma, and digitalisation. I'm honored, and on behalf of Copenhagen Capacity, Invest in Skåne, and Medicon Valley Alliance, to welcome you all to this 1.5 webinar, which I hope you will enjoy. I'll just give you a brief welcome, and then I will hand the floor to Niels Christian from Copenhagen Capacity. Medicon Valley is a geographical location based on the eastern part of Denmark and the southern part of Sweden. It's one cluster, and it's actually the largest life science cluster in the EU, but it's situated in 2 countries across 3 regions and only having 4 million people, despite the fact that it is actually the largest in the EU. Within Medicon Valley, Sophia, if you will pass the, thank you. Within Medicon Valley, this region, we have 9 universities, we have 9 life science parks and 28 hospitals. And the fact that I'm saying it's the largest is because we are having close to 66,000 life science jobs in this rather small geographical area. Everything we do in both Copenhagen Capacity, Invest in Skåne, and Medicon Valley has a strong collaboration, not just across borders, but also between private companies, hospitals, and academia, as you'll also hear about today. I hope you will have a wonderful seminar, and I'll pass now the floor for some practical information to Niels Christian Genop from Copenhagen Capacity.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Sophia, for putting on the next slide. Once again, welcome to this webinar. We have been working the better part of a year to get this up and running, and we look forward to sharing the next 1.5 hours with you. There are some practical things within the webinar, the housekeeping note, so to speak. First of all, you're all muted. If you need technical help, then please use the chat function. Then Sophia will do the best she can to help you with the problems you have. If you have questions for any of the speakers along the way, please use the Q&A function to write those questions. We will try to review them and keep an eye on what the questions are and try to incorporate at the end of the session in the plenary debate. I would also like to note that this session is recorded. So you can watch it again and again. So you can watch all of the great stuff that's coming out from the speakers. And the speakers and the topic is mental health. And it is actually one of the 5 leading chronic diseases in the world. It's costing society trillions of dollars, and it's decreasing the quality of life for millions of people around the world. So we wanted to bring together tech companies, pharma companies, and health tech digital therapeutics companies to hear what they are doing individually, but also hopefully have an interesting debate at the end where we bring them all together to try to get some cross discussion and crosstalk between the industries on how they're dealing with this. Yes, now it is time to hand the floor to Big Tech's approach to health. And I believe Martin Backlund from Invest in Skåne will take it from here. Please, Martin.
Thank you, Niels Christian, all the way from Japan, but working just fine. My name is Martin Backlund, and I'm with Invest in Skåne. We're the official investment promotion agency of Southern Sweden, and of course, health tech and biotech are very big topics with us. We thought today that we would introduce or start with listening to some of the global companies within IT, generally speaking, but also then specifically have them relate to the topic of how they work with healthcare and how data can make better can make therapies together with pharma that would ensure better outcomes and also better quality of life for people affected by by mental health issues. So without further ado, I would like to leave the word to Harry Tati of Amazon Web Services, and also introducing them Buddy Healthcare and Marcus Lind. And after that, we will hear from Nils Gröning from Microsoft. So please, Harry, take over.
Perfect. Thank you very much for the, first of all, the invitation to present this at this event. So my name is Harri Tatti. I work as part of our healthcare vertical team within Europe, Middle East and Africa, with the responsibility of overseeing what we call the strategic national initiatives, core e-health infrastructure project, or large region who are leveraging cloud to really transform the way healthcare services are being delivered to the patients, to the customers. As part of my presentation, I'll be sharing a high-level overview about the AWS approach to healthcare, our mission and vision and strategy. But AWS always works through the partners, how we help our customers to solve some of the kind of challenges what they have, like in case of mental health. So I've invited Marcus Lind from Buddy Healthcare to share what they've done and their solution around mental health, and how that helps our customers and the patient to solve some of the kind of concerns around how we are going to help to solve the kind of a challenge around mental health. So Marcus will then be kind of following with the presentation after my slides. So Marcus, could you kind of click to the next slide, please? So before giving the stage to Marcus, I'm just going to share briefly the AWS Healthcare and Life Sciences mission. So our mission is to enable the access and delivery of person-centered healthcare, driving improved outcomes at lower cost by accelerating the digitalization and utilization of the healthcare data. And the two key elements when it also comes to mental health are around the person-centered healthcare and accelerating the digitization and utilization of healthcare data. As AWS, we are providing the security and compliance and privacy that our customers can trust when they kind of build their service on top of our AWS cloud platform. Organizations like GE Healthcare, Philips, Moderna, and Buddy Healthcare, they've leveraged AWS services when they've been building their solutions. One of the ways how we work with our customers and partners is that we help them to accelerate innovation. AWS has the kind of a broadest and deepest portfolio of cloud-based services, but we have also built healthcare-specific solutions and services which will help our customers and partners to kind of innovate and drive the digitalization of healthcare. But really, the kind of a biggest value of technology comes when you can actually unlock the value of the data and provide the actionable insight so that you can improve the clinical, operational, and research efficiency and move towards more of a personalized healthcare. Next slide, please, Marcus. The way we at AWS see the cloud-enabled digital transformation and the value chain, there are 4 different elements where we as a company are investing. First of them being that we are helping our customers and partners to secure the healthcare data in the cloud, migrate those kind of systems what they are running today on-premise or on-premise to cloud, so that they can kind of start innovating. Once the kind of the on-premise infrastructure has been migrated to cloud, the next area where we are investing is to making sure that the information is supporting the data liquidity, making sure that the data flows between the different systems, supported by interoperability, for example, using standards like FHIR. And once we have the kind of systems connected, we can then really start to use the healthcare data as the strategic asset for the organization, use the data as the Markus, if you could go back to the slides, please. And then use that data for advanced analytics, building algorithms, using artificial intelligence to really drive clinical and operational excellence. And then as the fourth area of investment, and what Markus is actually going to talk about, is really to creating the delightful healthcare engagements for the individual, for the patient, for the customer. And this is like where I see that partners like Buddy Healthcare are really bringing the light into the use of the technology. Markus, with that, I want to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Harry. I'm Markus Lind, VP of Product and Business Management at Buddy Healthcare, and I will tell you a little bit what we are doing and how we are using Amazon Web Services to engage patients and healthcare professionals better. Short agenda of the presentation, I will tell what the platform is, what we are doing, some customer benefits, and then some case example from mental health, what we are doing with mental health cases, and then few words about the company itself. So what Buddy Healthcare is doing, we are digitalizing care processes to healthcare professionals and to their patients in different medical specialties, from operative care to internal medicine, to some extent to chronic care, and now even more in mental health. How we are doing that? End user patients or their relatives are using native app, and in the app they have all care-related information, instructions, questions, whatever they need to do before hospital admission and what they need to do afterwards. Healthcare professionals are using dashboard. It automatically follows the actions in the app and will highlight those patients who may need extra help. And for hospital management, we are providing reporting tool where they can evaluate patients' reported outcomes, quality of life questionnaires, or whatever metrics they want to follow. When a patient is referred to care, instead of having lots of phone calls and paper-based forms, he will be invited to the digital care. And in the very simple to use native application, they have all care-related information, instructions, questionnaires, reminders, what they need to do before hospital admission, and all information, what they need to do, and what forms they need to fill after the hospital admission. It's horizontal timeline. Patients will follow the care with the notifications that app is delivering to them. It's transparent care, so you can see the future, you can go back to the history, so you are always aware what you need to do next. You can send messages to healthcare professionals and add some photos, or you can include your wife or other relative to the same care pathway to support you in your care. Healthcare professionals' dashboards follows the actions what patient is taking in the app, and if they are about to drop from the care or they have some symptoms that are exceeding thresholds, it will send notification to doctors and nurses that these patients may need some help. If the patient is cooperative one and are fine with the care, there is no need to make any additional contact with these patients. Healthcare professionals can modify the care. It will be done also automatically in some extent, and you can communicate with the patient. Platform is modular. We can do care processes to different medical specialties. And reporting database collects all the data from the application and from healthcare professionals for further analysis. Simple example of outpatient surgery care pathway. There is
Markus, did we lose your voice, or is it just me?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can hear you.
So, sorry about the headsets. So this was simple example of surgery care pathway that we digitalize all
Yes, Marcus, we lost you again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry about the Bluetooth devices. So we are working across the hospital. Currently, we have deployed different care protocols to 27 different medical specialties. We have done over 300 care processes, and we have over 100 international prompts digitalized and over 60 psychiatric questionnaires. There are some examples of self-reported psychiatric questionnaires we have deployed to software. Some customer benefits. Tampere University Hospital is second biggest hospital in Finland, and they are using our platform in 12 different medical specialties, but they started with the ENT outpatient surgery clinic and in children's psychiatry. In ENT, they were able to enroll almost every patient. They invited everybody, and 9 out of 10 chose digital care pathway instead of paper-based forms and phone calls. From them, the reduction of phone calls was almost 100%, and nurses saved over 70 minutes preparation time only in pre-op phase of care. Other example from same hospital, we digitalized with them 8 weeks and anger management program for parents. Almost all family joined to the digital program, and healthcare professionals saved significant amount of time. Before, parents were using paper-based calendar to fill up these questionnaires, but now they did all on time into the app, and healthcare professionals were able to save significant amount of time. Then other example from mental health is from Turku University Hospital. We started to collaborate with them in the end of 2020, and they digitalized with us neuromodulation department care pathways. You can see here are these indications. I don't really know very deeply what these are, but they digitalized 5 different processes into our application. And the processes consist 6 appointments with all information, instructions, and lots of quality of life and self-reported mental health questionnaires to evaluate the care quality and value-based healthcare in neuromodulation. They have used the platform now almost 2 years, and every patient is enrolled to the digital care, and over 80% is selecting digital version compared to paper-based formats and phone calls. They have had a significant reduction in phone calls, as you can see how many messages patients have sent, 1,800 from 440 patients, and healthcare professionals have sent 3,700 messages. And imagine if all these would be phone calls. So they have saved significant amount of time. Now the data is much more used in analyzing care outcomes because it's already in a structured format in our reporting database. And of course, standardized processes is much easier to measure. And they will continue, of course, using our solution and scaling up to other psychiatry care protocols also. They started to expand the solution to primary care also. And the challenge in primary care mental health protocols are that they are heavily dependent on the doctor and nurse who is treating you. If the doctor changes, the protocol changes, or if nurse changes, the care changes also. So it's not very standardized way of treating patients. Every instance have their own way of treating the patients, and every doctor has their own way of treating mental health patients. And it's impossible to measure quality of care in these kind of settings. And solution, what they did with us, that we started with mood disorder process, one process for whole region. And now 9 primary care centers are using exactly the same pathway. All the doctors, all the nurses. It's now offered in Finnish and Swedish language, and every instance is using the same
care protocol, same schedules and things like that. Easier to measure care quality, and the care is equal to every patient. And their plan is to digitalize all primary care mental health processes in the future, and we started with mood disorders, but now we are doing work with them to do other alcoholism and other kind of care protocols to mental health. We are waiting first year results, and those would be ready in Q1 next year. Shortly about the company itself, we are a Finnish company founded in early 2016. We have offices in Helsinki, UK, and Germany, and we have a direct sales organizations in Finland and in Germany. And currently, we are working in 8 countries, mostly in Europe. This SaaS service data location is in European Union, and of course, UK have their own data instance. So we have 2 data instances in Amazon Cloud. After Brexit, you have to have own data instance in the UK. For patients, we are offering iOS and Android native apps, and healthcare professionals are using browser-based solution, and also reporting databases browser-based solution. Our platform is CE marked, ISO certified, and we are GDPR and HIPAA compliant, and we fill all necessary requirements from NHS to use our solution in the UK. And currently we are supporting 14 different languages. So platform can be used almost in every country in Western Europe. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. Very interesting presentation and very interesting take on how you can support the delivery of better care for different types of diagnosis. And thank you so much, Harry, for taking part as well. If you have questions, please post them in the Q&A. I'm going to now introduce Niels Gröning from Microsoft, who has somewhat different take on healthcare and healthcare data, and then we'll try to take a few questions at the end, depending on how the timing looks. So take it away, Niels.
Thank you. I'll just minimize this. Here we go. And thank you for inviting me today to this webinar and very kind of exciting topic. My name is Niels Gröning. I work as a senior specialist in Microsoft, covering primarily the data and AI space, which luckily fits very well into the topic I'm going to be elaborating a bit on. Been with Microsoft for 2.5 years, supporting the business verticals in health and life sciences. Have been working in this space for many years, also from an educational point of view, and have actually been part of a lot of the interest and also the evolution we've seen in both the healthcare and life sciences space. So I'm happy to join today and speak with you, and hopefully we get a chance to get some questions towards the end. So the next 15 minutes, I'm going to touch a little bit upon some of the trends we see in the digital health space. So you could say the digital health space might be a very broad topic. So what I'll try to do the next 15 minutes is to bring our perspective from a Microsoft point of view, both from where do we see the industry going, but importantly also where we see our very big developer community moving the health and life sciences space. I'll deliver a little bit of insights into the digital feedback loops we see, and why is that important for building and innovating in this space. And then we'll also dip our toes a little bit into what we consider kind of the new normal, which certainly during the past couple of years have turned a lot of the more conservative part of the industry a little bit upside down. We'll just dig into it, and I'm actually going to start with a little bit of a different perspective. My dad, he's a fairly old guy, you could say. He is 76 years old, and with that lifespan, obviously comes you could say changes to his healthcare. So he recently texted me because he had been to the hospital for a checkup regarding his kidney. And one of the kind of mind-blowing things beyond him actually being well, which was, I guess, the most important thing, was that he texted me and he basically told me, "Hey, Niels, you know, before I even left the hospital, the analysis results from the lab were already inside of my app." So in this case, it was in Denmark, we have something called Sundhed.dk, and the analysis results were actually already available. And that actually left me with a lot of kind of, confidence that we are on the right track. And he actually compared it to, the healthcare should be as seamless as when I use my mobile pay or banking service. It should be real time, it should be my data, and it should be available, and I should be able to use it in whichever way I want. So I thought that was a very kind of befitting way to also demonstrate a little bit how far we've come in this industry over the years, that even my dad of 76, he can enjoy, the joys of technology. A little bit of the perspectives as we see this, and certainly with the changes ongoing, I think one of the narratives we at least try to evangelize within Microsoft is that we are now considering all companies are software companies. And you might ask, why does this matter in this case? Well, that basically means that all life science companies are also software companies, in a sense that we believe that the future revolves around a seamless, in this case, not customer experience, but patient experience. And we see the ability to develop, publish, and manage digital solutions in a ever expanding patient cohort is something that needs to be top of mind for all life science and healthcare companies. I had a meeting last week with a life science customer, and one of the things we hear a lot, especially in the digital health space, is, how do we target the patient? So this notion that, I need to have the same patient experience as or recommendation engine when I go online shopping. If you bought this t-shirt, you might also want to buy this particular clothing item. And I think a lot of the premises around how life sciences and healthcare has changed over the years has in as much been a cultural change, that what can we actually learn from other industries? How can we build patient recommendation engines, leveraging real world evidence and feeding that into the internal feedback loop of life science companies? So a lot of that change, I believe, is a step in the right direction from actually now considering the patient journey as important as the customer journey in this case. Health data insights definitely, again, goes hand in hand with the second bullet point. Without the right amount of data and the right amount of, you could say, use cases, this becomes a very difficult task. More importantly, we also see that companies are exploring vastly different business models. So the ability to not only acknowledge that we have a fairly big healthcare community of either patients or end users, but actually how do we use that to the benefit of our company? If we truly want to become a software company, how do we commercialize potentially on the IP we gain from the data capture process? That is slowly, questions we are being asked in terms of how do we build that mechanism internally to commercialize this digital feedback loop, which goes in hand with the data sharing. How do we share data across our platforms? How do we make sure that the patients and end users feel a sense from a regulatory point of view that this is their data, they own the data? So a lot of really interesting conversation the past 2.5 years, I would say, across the board. So really exciting times, and really great that we have this webinar. I think it comes at a perfect point in time. If we look a little bit the old and the new normal, from our perspective, we've seen again that historically, if we take the life science industry, and I guess to some extent also the healthcare industry, this has been a very much V-shaped model. So having a very rigid approach to, in this case, software development, it has been from developing solutions over years to very costly and a very linear mindset. I think what we see now is, and that is certainly a push from the patient community, is that we want to get the same digital experience. We want to get frequent releases. We want to get the most cutting edge applications available to basically help me as a end user or a patient to reach my efficacy, reach the treatment goals that are, you could say, relevant to me. So we're moving from kind of a V model to an agile approach, from weeks to years, from a very low cost and to a more agile mindset. And with that comes kind of the umbrella around also the scalability. So you can imagine building now applications that are patient-centric. The ability to scale has never been better because there's frankly no limitation to the compute and the reach that you can gain from publishing an app to a cloud instance in this case. So a lot of changes, and a lot of changes are actually driven by a multidisciplinary approach to digital health. So learning from other industries, learning how can we adapt to the changes from our patient cohort perspective, and how can we build a more agile, frequent release type applications that in the end, you could say, can better the quality of life for patients. So, and I think the multidisciplinary approach to this is certainly also a kind of a push we've seen over the years. So we are now seeing partnerships mix and match between both academia and the private sector. We're also seeing more technology players coming into this part. And we're also, frankly, seeing technology companies collaborating across boundaries to basically take the notion that this is in the best interest of the patient, that we collaborate across that. If we look at this from a kind of Lego block perspective, certainly the take from our perspective is that to make available the best developer resources of any, you could say, provider, because it is, you could say, in our interest that the next big thing will not be developed necessarily by us. It will actually be developed by our either our partner ecosystem or all of the great companies that operate in this field. So this approach to empowering others to build on top of the technology platform is certainly something that we will continue to do. And we see tons of examples across the board of really innovative stuff being built, both in-house at life science companies or healthcare providers, but certainly also by third parties that are leveraging the kind of the different tool sets and platforms available. Interestingly enough, I think that the aspirations to meet the patient from a digital touch point perspective is always something that there's been a keen interest to do. I think historically there's been different obstacles preventing that. During the pandemic, I think a lot of the kind of conservative approaches to digitization in the digital health space were kind of turned upside down. So there seems to be a lot more focus now on that. It's not a matter of if we can build it, but it's more a matter of how, and how can we build this from a regulatory point of view. So meeting the patient similar to the way you would do in a customer setting is certainly a trend we see, but also expanding a platform that reaches beyond the payer-provider philosophy, but actually expanding this to much more focus on let's meet the patient where they are. If it's telecommunications using, video conferencing, which were a big, you could say, push during Corona, then that will be the vehicle we communicate with patients. So how can we, from a cultural and adoption perspective, make sure that that the healthcare service is extended to where the patient is, and not as such demanding a on-site visit, if that's the case. That has certainly been a big push for decentralized clinical trials. We see that in other companies moving in that direction again. But this ecosystem, I think a big push for this has also been very much around the standardization of the data. So FHIR, for instance, being one of the consortiums we are a part of, will be the foundational element for bringing healthcare data and into a digital solution, and triaging that data, working over that data, querying and building models on top of that. So this road is really the one where we need to see the patient as one, and we need to build an ecosystem that demands that these digital touchpoints are captured throughout the entire treatment cycle of a given patient. So the digital feedback loop is basically the way that we collect, ingest, analyze data across the different verticals that are involved in this sense. You can imagine, when I drove to work this morning, I heard about kind of the lack of nurses in Denmark, which I think is probably the case across a number of industries or a number of countries in Europe these days. So a lot of emphasis has these days been, especially also in the healthcare and life science space, how can we do more with less? How can we optimize the way we work? And I think a big push for this has been the ability to gather data, triage data, work with data, and optimize that, embedding it into your decisioning process and your operational aspects of your company, if that's the case. So we not only see the push from a healthcare perspective, but also from a macroeconomic perspective, that we need to do more with less. We need to work better. We need to work smarter. We need to use data as the foundational element, but we also need to make sure that whatever we build is in the best interest of the patient. So there's not a patient that will willingly give the information unless there is some kind of feedback in terms of that. So you could say contractual relationship between the patient and the provider in this case needs to result in a benefit to the customer. Maybe it's related to their dosing schemas being improved. There could be other elements that in this case could drive the willingness to share data with a third party. The health data insights, certainly on the left-hand side, I mean, right now you have the ability to gather data from a number of either structured or unstructured data sources. I think the projects I've been on have predominantly not been as much. It is difficult to stitch the technology together. It's more been a matter of how do we do this in a secure way? Imagine if you're patients with thousands of devices. How do you make sure that this is done in a secure, encrypted way? How do we move that data from a patient and triage it, and we standardize it? Because frankly, you might have digital touch points about biomarker information that is non-standardized, which is possibly collected in different files and formats. How do you build that together? And at the end of the day, how do you push that information? How do you push that value downstream to the patient? Possibly not only one centralized model, but we also see kind of the many models approach, where if you are truly going into personalized medicine, you might need to acknowledge the small scale differences between patients and make sure that whatever you build for, it is built according to the individual and not from a mass perspective. So managing a multi-model distribution across digital health is extremely complicated. But again, it's an area where some elements of technology can help. It is definitely not a trivial task, but we see now examples of not only thousands, but hundreds of thousands of devices being operated in this space. So moving from the things that you gain insight into the actual action and pushing that information. So for instance, a good example, Novo Nordisk just released their Onwards 5 clinical trial results, where they have been using an app to support the patient in terms of their dosing regimen. We're probably going to see much more of this the next coming years, how you augment the patient journey, both from a post-market perspective, but also during the clinical trials to potentially link the digital product with the therapeutics. And I guess the hypothesis is that you can improve the treatment to target, and at the end of the day, the quality of life for the patient. That leads me kind of to the next question, who are the patients and how are the demographics changing? So we looked a little bit from our perspective. Every year we do a survey, it's the trend index on this. And I thought that was really interesting to bring up also, how is the patient cohort going to change and what will the future demand be for digital health solutions? So in this case, the survey revolved around the metaverse and how that will change work, but we could kind of extend that to how will that change the healthcare industry? How will the next generation expect from companies to have much more digital products? How do they expect them to operate in a metaverse type setting? I think it's very kind of interesting to bring that perspective in here and also find out how do we build digital health solutions where potentially you do remote patient engagement with doctors and so forth. So I think there's a lot of food for thought in terms of how do we drive that together, because one thing we can't stop is the kind of increasing demand from a generation that has been kind of born into the internet and born into a digital world. So a lot of the industries will now need to kind of adapt to that. Right. So my second last slide is just around how we look at kind of digital health from it could be an employee perspective, but imagine that you might have seen this already. How do you nudge your employees to especially look at mental health from a perspective of post-corona? So you'll most likely see many more small or big scale solutions coming out from vendors across the board, which more revolves around how do you allocate focus time in your daily life? How do you track mood? How do you track the general wellness of your employees or patients in this case? So we certainly see a much more focus on this, and you'll probably see more of this coming up the next coming years in terms of, because a big part of your daily work is mental health, and it is it will potentially also be a big kind of game changer in terms of how do you melt the working from home from working on site type of philosophy into your daily life. Right. So the last slide I have is kind of the good news. At least we are optimistic. I'm optimistic around is good digital health just around the corner. I mean, we certainly believe it is, and I think there's never been a better time in the world to revolutionize this area, and there's certainly the building blocks out there to do it. But it will be a bipartisan, collaboration between regulators, the industry, in our case, technology industry, and the healthcare or life science companies. So kind of ending on a positive note that I think we are on the right trajectory, and it's certainly kind of exciting times to be part of. With that, I'll conclude my talk and open up the floor if we have time for a few questions.
Thank you so much, Niels. That was super interesting, and I take away a couple of things. Better data leads to better abilities to personalization, and unfortunately we're running a little bit late, so I'm going to hand over to Niels Christian right now for our next topic, and we'll save the questions to after the sessions. We have a Q&A slot there as well. So thank you so much again, Niels, and I'm handing over to Niels Christian.
Thank you very much, Martin. Now it is a great pleasure to introduce Jakob Diemer from Lundbeck, where he is Senior Digital Health Scientist in Digital Technologies. And yes, Jakob, please take it away.
Thank you, Niels Christian. I'll share my screen here, so let me know if it goes through correctly.
It goes through fine.
Perfect. Good. So thank you for inviting me today, and happy to be giving a little bit of a presentation on how we work with digital health technologies in Lundbeck, and more specifically within our clinical development, so meaning in our clinical trials. So as Niels Christian said, my name is Jacob Dimar. I have a background in sports technology with the focus on using sensor systems for acquiring human data and interpreting that data. And I previously founded a small sport tech startup. And since 2019, I've been a senior digital health scientist at Lundbeck. So what exactly do I do, and what do my three colleagues do in our small digital health technologies team? Well, we are responsible for the evaluation, selection, and implementation of digital health technologies in our Lundbeck clinical trials. So that means that we are part of scouting the market for possibilities, creating awareness about the way we can use these possibilities for adding value in our clinical trials, and optimizing the way we work with these new digital technologies and how we can avoid sort of the common pitfalls. And that, of course, includes staying on top of the science in the field, looking at market trends, and collaborating with a lot of external partners to sort of make sure that we are on top of our game in terms of making the best out of the available technology. So just up front, I want to sort of just put some words to us. What do we consider to be digital health, at least in this context in Lundbeck? So FDA recently launched a draft guidance document for how you can use these technologies for remote data acquisition in clinical trials. And they state that digital health is a system that uses computing platforms, connectivity, software, and/or sensors for healthcare and related uses. These technologies span a wide range of uses, from applications in general wellness to applications as a medical device. And lastly, that they may also be used to develop or study medical products. So whenever we are conducting clinical trials, we have two goals in terms of our data collection. That is basically to show that our compounds, our drugs, are safe to use, and that they're effective in whatever disease or symptomology that we're trying to target. So these digital health technologies in this context could be anything from smartphone apps, wearables, body-worn sensors, EEG headbands for sleep monitoring, home monitoring radar systems, and so on and so on. So really, we are quite device agnostic when it comes to these technologies. And there are plenty of data sources available out there. I'm pretty sure that the vast majority of the audience at least have a smartphone, but probably also some form of a wellness tracker in form of a Fitbit or Apple Watch. But there are additional sensor streams available across our daily lives from which we can pick out useful data or meaningful data. So where can we actually use these technologies in clinical research? Well, I teased the use for clinical trials to show efficacy and safety of our drugs, but it could also be used to sort of stratify or narrow down a patient segmentation that we want to include in a certain trial. But it could also be used during natural history studies to better understand disease progression or gather normative data for biomarker development, or in this case, digital biomarker development. And then lastly, for commercial purposes in a pharmaceutical company, for label expansion as one example of already approved compounds. So what are the benefits of digital technologies or digital health technologies in clinical development? Well, we regard it basically as an extension to an already established toolbox of assessments and patient-reported outcomes and ways to capture a change in the patient's functioning or quality of life. But this new addition of digital tools provide us with some additional benefits that doesn't get fulfilled by already established methods. So first and foremost, we are able to, by looking at sensor data, get very objective and sensitive assessments at a very high frequency while monitoring the patient, not only in clinic, but also at the patient's own home. I've included this example on the right in terms of cognitive function as an example, where traditionally we would measure cognitive function as a sort of a one-point time point in the timeline in the clinical trial. maybe with a year in between, where in the first instance, we are measuring on a bad day, we are capturing the patient on a bad day where their cognitive function is quite severely worsened. And on the follow-up visit, we are capturing the patient on a good day in their cognitive function. But if we looked at the trend and had more frequent assessment of cognitive function, we would know that the true change has actually shown us that the patient had declined throughout the 1 year. So I believe there's some bias in the traditional way of conducting these very specific in-time assessments, which digital health technologies can help combat. Of course, it comes with a reduced patient burden because we can now all of a sudden replace very elaborate assessments in clinic with sort of small body-worn sensor packages. And we can also, what we've seen is that that's one way to improve compliance with the patients, that they're actually using the assessments and completing their assessments when it becomes easier for the patients. And then lastly, during the pandemic, being able to capture data at the patient's own home at a continuous rate is a very strong tool to enable us to continue trial conduct during a global pandemic. If we look at how we actually implement these technologies, the order of doing so is very important. So I've split it up into a sort of a three-pillar approach, looking at the measures, the technology, and the operations. So the measures would speak to what do we want to measure. The technology would speak to what tool we use to obtain these measures of interest. And lastly, well, how do we implement this selected tool to obtain the measures? The importance of the order here is speaking to the fact that we should avoid utilizing digital technologies for the sake of doing so. For example, we should not be including a certain device in our clinical trial just because someone in the clinical team have found that device of specific interest. We should not just go out and order 300 devices without knowing what to do with it. No, it's very important that we, like any other clinical assessment in our clinical trial, understand the hypothesis and the rationale behind what is it we want to examine with this tool. So if we look at the first part of it, what do we want to measure? Of course, speaking into the mode of action of the compound in question, or the drug in question, and what we expect to change for the patient, we would also be looking at what is important to patient. So as an example, we could have a Parkinson's disease patient who says, well, I want to be able to walk so I can visit my family more regularly, as a sort of a case example. That would be the sort of the meaningful aspect of health, or the aspect of the disease that the patient wants to improve, or at least not worsening. Then we would look at the overall concept of interest. In this case, it would be physical activity or walking. And then when we are defining our endpoints of the outcome that we want to actually measure, in this case, it could be steps per day, or it could be walking bouts. And when we then look at the data from a clinical trial, we would then compare, for example, a worsening or an improvement in steps per day when the patient is on the active drug, or when the patient is on placebo treatment. The most important takeaway here is that building this rationale is quite an elaborate process, and it requires that we engage all, both internal and external stakeholders, and we build the rationale together. And I'll get back to exactly how we envisioning this to be done. So if we look at sort of the technology part of the three-pillar approach, how do we want to measure it? So now we established, let's say that we want to look at steps per day as a measure of quality of life for PD patients. Well, then we start to evaluate both the methods, the specific technologies, and ultimately the vendors of those technologies on multiple levels. So when we are writing the protocol and preparing for the clinical trials, there's a lot of consideration that needs to be handled before we decide on a specific supplier of these technologies. And first and foremost, we need to ask ourselves whether the certain technology or method is suitable for measuring the outcome of interest. So we would, for example, not use a sleep monitoring device to measure steps per day. That's quite obvious. But then we would look into the validation framework, or the to what extent the technology or method have been validated. And we hear validation quite a lot in the field, but the DIME Society, Digital Medicine Society, have actually done a great effort in trying to sort of separate the validation aspect of these technologies into the first one being verification. So this is whether the sensors themselves in whatever tech solution is accurately capturing the physiological signal without too much of an error. And then the analytical validation, which evaluates how the algorithm of a certain model is able to convert these raw sensor signal into some useful metrics. So for example, converting accelerations from a smartwatch into some sort of metric of physical activity, for example, steps per day. And then lastly, clinical validation, which evaluates whether that measure that the model is able to provide you with is meaningful for a certain patient population. And then lastly, the plus simple clinical utility or usability evaluates whether a device or technology is clinically feasible for patients to use. So this is sort of very much speaking to the user experience part of it. Then we look into data access, ownership, security, compliance with regulations. There are a lot here listed. And then, of course, at the end, we compare across technologies and vendors to sort of provide a trial-specific technology recommendation for that specific clinical trial. And how do we choose our partners? Well, we realize that there is quite an obvious relationship between innovation and maturity. Digital health is quite a rapidly developing field, and there are a lot of very new, interesting tech startup that has some very interesting science presented, but that they might not have sort of the organizational infrastructure in place like we are normally used to work with in our clinical trial setting. But that doesn't mean that that's a showstopper for us working with smaller tech startups. It just means that we need to understand the drivers and the needs of the partners that we work with, and vice versa, basically. The best way to do this is to set clear expectations, and this of course requires experience, but this is very much about having an open dialogue between us and the vendors. And I'll get back to this a little bit more in a later slide. I will not dwell too much on how we actually go about implementing the technology, but these are just some of the operational aspects and documents that need to be in place. But it just highlights the fact that it's quite an extensive project, and it needs good cross-functional internal and external collaboration. And lastly, that the traditional processes of how we conduct clinical trials might not always fit these new technologies. Last main slide I brought today is sort of my effort to sort of sum up my good suggestions or tips and tricks for medtech companies approaching pharma companies for the sake of collaboration. So we are having a lot of vendor meetings with very interesting vendors, but some of the key takeaways and ways to improve those interactions is, if you as a medtech company focus first and foremost on what you do well. Don't try to cover everything, don't try to solve all problems, but focus on what you do well, and try to build the business case for your client, whether it's Lundbeck or another pharma company. Try to build the business case on what limited information is available to you. Clarify your interest and needs. I realized that in the early days of a startup journey, it's oftentimes funding that is of most interest, but it could very well also be more important to look at data rather than traditional payment as such. Get acquainted with different regulations and then affiliate yourself with this validation V3+ framework. And then lastly, realize that it's always a fit for project both timing and context-wise discussion that you are having with these maybe a bit bigger companies where timelines tend to be a bit on the slower side sometimes, but realize that sometimes the timing of a certain project might not just fit with the scope. And then very lastly, be the expert. When we buy a service or product from our partners, we also expect them to share their opinion and their expertise with us and not hold back for the sake of trying to establish a better collaboration. Lastly, in the interest of time, I will leave this slide just for a couple of seconds for people to screenshot. Should you wish to do so, it's just a list of some guidance documents, consortia, and public-private partnerships that might be of interest to some. I will not go through them, but we'll just leave it for a couple of seconds here, should you wish to note down these. But that's really my presentation. So I want to once again thank you for inviting me, Niels Christian, and then leave it off with this comic that I find to be very relevant in this age of digitalization and trying to push the boundaries of where are we heading in what sort of direction are we heading in the near future. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jakob, for this. I think in the interest of time, we will jump straight over and save the questions for the very end. So Krista, I can see you're already ready. That's good. Please, Krista.
Yes, can you hear me? Hello, everyone. I am Krista Månsson, also invest in Skåne, and with a special interest of the health tech area. Some call it digital health, and some health tech, and some e-health. We are 10 minutes behind the schedule, but still I would like to tell both Paula and Daniel, take your time, because what you have to convey here is really interesting into this discussion. The interesting thing is that Medicon Valley is truly leading the health tech, the Nordic health tech area, which is great. And I would like to, within mental health, and I would first like to introduce Brain Plus, a Danish company, a company clearly leading the innovative new medical field trend we call digital therapeutics, in short, DTX. And Brain Plus have a very exciting solution for treating and preventing Alzheimer's and dementia. Please welcome Paula Petsu.
Thank you so much for the introduction. And it's wonderful to be here in the company of some amazing speakers. My background has been over time both working in IT consultancy, so being on the tech side, and then also in the pharma side, and now working at Brain Plus, an innovative digital therapeutic company, more on the startup side. So it's amazing to get the different perspectives in this webinar. And actually, I agree a lot with what was said until now by my co-speakers. I would like to add that there's another thought to be had in terms of having a more holistic perspective on things, going from the patient-centric healthcare and treatment to actually human centricity, thinking about what that person for which we are developing all these treatments and providing services, thinking that that person, before becoming a patient, they can be anyone among us. And also after receiving treatment, it's again a person that needs care. So we have quite a lot of work to do. There are multiple aspects, and I believe that together as pharma, startups, technology providers, we can build an ecosystem around the human to provide the necessary healthcare. As it was mentioned also by Niels from Microsoft earlier, I really liked the example from his dad on expectations on healthcare, because that is one of the drivers towards digitalization. We almost expect nowadays to have a personalized treatment and digital delivery. Everything during COVID has gone a bit more towards the virtual side. The doctor-patient interaction has changed. We can use data for more frequent assessment, collect real-world evidence, and collect even digital biomarkers, develop digital biomarkers based on the data that can be collected remotely via sensors, apps, various wearable devices, and so on. There's also an area where I think we have an unmet need, especially in terms of mental health. If we think about that, there are a lot of treatments out there for indications that are looking at the symptomatic treatment and prevention, but cannot serve the entire patient population. That is the case, for example, with Alzheimer's disease, where treatments have been failing over the past years and have certain side effects. So there's an opportunity there to consider digital health tools that can change behavior, improve adherence, and also combine the digital therapeutic with the pharmacological intervention. And that's exactly what we are trying to do at Brain Plus. And our focus area is actually on dementia, which is on the rise globally. We have 50 million people globally currently having a dementia diagnosis, probably more not diagnosed yet. And it's expected that that number will triple by 2050. And you can imagine also this is a major burden on the healthcare system. There are opportunities to be taken there, and having combinations of digital health and digital therapeutics could be a potential improvement. Our vision at Brain Plus is actually making effective dementia treatments accessible to everyone. And we do that as digital therapeutics. We want to restore patients' independence and quality of life. And we're looking at 3 areas: preventing, detecting, and treating dementia and Alzheimer's disease particularly. We create evidence-based digital therapeutics, and we run clinical trials like in the pharma world to prove that evidence, make the clinical claims. We have a team that includes scientists and experience from pharma. We have also people that have been working in the game industry for a while. So what we use is the power of gamification to make motivating and empowering patient experiences. Because we've talked so much today on the digital health side, I would like to just spend a brief moment also talking about digital therapeutics, which can be seen as a subset of digital health, because digital therapeutics differ from digital wellness devices. You have a lot of digital health apps on the store. So how is a digital solution different? Digital therapeutics are actually software solutions that treat, manage, or prevent a disease or disorder. So this is like the definition coming from the Digital Therapeutic Alliance to sync across the industries on what we mean by digital therapeutic. So a digital health app that you find in the App Store might be beneficial, but it might not have demonstrated effect in any of the important aspects of the patient life. So we are running, similar to a pharma company, going through the evidence base and publishing the results at the same kind of regulatory requirements as required for medical devices. So we develop software as a medical device is compliant with all the regulations on developing and also storage of data and privacy policy and all of that. So this is just a side note on what the digital therapeutics are. And if we look more into what we actually do at Brain Plus, we have 3 core technologies. The first one is cognitive stimulation therapy, which is a guided talk therapy for people with mild to moderate dementia. It contains exercise and activities presented in a digital version, and it's available as a software solution, available in the web browser and also as mobile apps on tablets and smartphones. I will get back a bit more into this because this is the first product that we are launching now this year. But just to give you an idea of what else we have in the pipeline, We are also working on a computerized cognitive training. That's a therapy to train brain functions and prevent cognitive decline in the future. This is currently being researched, so we cannot make the claims yet, but we are building the evidence base with our experience in gamifying solutions. We think that this could be improving patient adherence as well in mild cognitive impairment populations. And then a third technology would be more on the detection side. So we have a solution called Starry Night. It's a memory test that we have designed together with collaborators from Oxford University. That's actually how we work with all these solutions we co-develop with the researchers. It's designed to actually assess potential signs of Alzheimer's disease. If we look at the cognitive stimulation therapy, it's a clinically validated psychosocial therapy. It has been used for many years in UK, where it was initially developed, and now it's used in 35 countries around the world. The idea of the therapy is that you have conversation that trigger memories to make your brain work. If you're thinking about a person with dementia, they might get a bit isolated depending on their difficulties, memory problems, and so on. So what we want to do is improve both the quality of life of the person with dementia and also their caregiver. So we took this idea and digitalized it. Our first product that we're launching this year is called the Cognitive Stimulation Therapy Therapist Companion. So we provide digitalized, standardized content for group sessions. The standard treatment for this is 7 weeks of 2 sessions a week, 45 minutes each, in which groups of like 4 or 5 people get together together with a therapist that conducts the session and have discussions. There is a standard framework for delivery of CST, and we have developed this content together with the CST therapists, researchers, patients, and caregivers. The advantage of using this compared to just manual work and Googling is actually a standardized way in which therapy can be delivered. There's also possibility to collecting more better data, more standardized, but also ensuring that the therapist actually spends more time with the patient rather than Googling and finding data and images to be shown. We are planning to then bring this in the home of patients with dementia, where the person with dementia and their caregiver can continue the program and create meaningful conversations and think about past memories, share thoughts, and we want to increase the quality of life of both the person with dementia, but also their caregiver, which could be a family member. And this can be done remotely. That is one of the advantages when you think about digital. You can develop at scale and make it available for much more people than you would otherwise. And then last slide before we can go more into questions. I would like to show that digital therapeutics as a field, we have some trends now coming up where it's taken more seriously from being something that is innovative to understanding what's the business case for it. We are seeing a lot of deals between pharma and digital therapeutics companies, either in the form of acquisitions or partnering, and some pharma companies like Aptar, Pharma, they are actually considering digital therapeutics as its own business center. And this is very interesting to see. There's a lot of funding going into this. And importantly, it can be seen also as a similar track for providing a pill, a medication, you can provide a digital therapeutic. Yeah, so hopefully this was really interesting for the audience, a bit of awareness on digital therapeutic that can be part of the entire ecosystem for human-centric healthcare. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Paula. Indeed interesting. And since we are running out of time, I still want to pass you one question, but you can only get 30 seconds to answer this question. And I know it's unfair, but both AWS and Microsoft are talking about insight, sharing data, and what could we achieve. So in the Alzheimer's disease and big data, if we could collect and analyze a lot of patient-centric data with those technologies, would we then be able to identify the disease so early that we could even prevent it, or at least slow it down? 30 seconds for this $1 million question.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and that is exactly what we want to do. Currently, we're developing a treatment for those that have already been diagnosed, but we have in the pipeline things for mild cognitive impairment. And even going before that, if we could collect data and go into the preventative space, it could be lifestyle intervention, nutrition changes, all of that. If we can have digital tools that can collect and offer that data, yes, I believe we have a huge potential there.
Thank you for that answer, Paula. And then let me introduce Flow Neuroscience, a company now on the Swedish side. A company that offers a product and services treating depression and has achieved great success in Europe and South America and is on the brink of entering into the US right now. Welcome, Daniel Månsson, the CEO.
Thank you very much. I have to correct you there. I'm not the CEO anymore. I'm the CCO, so the Chief Clinical Officer, since about 4 months, but it's correct that I ran the company until then for 6.5 years. Okay, can you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Christer, and the team for inviting me to this webinar. I will now present our solution to a big problem, depression. And you can see this as a case study of how you potentially could do it. But let's start in what we're trying to do. So the company has as a mission to create treatments for the many people. So we are not a company that produces these specialized things that are used in the clinic and that many rich people can use or very few people can use. We are there for the many. So we are creating personalized treatment solutions in the form of a brain stimulation headset combined with a behavioral training program. And we're starting out with depression. So this is how it actually looks. It's a, should we say, a 2-component solution, or actually 3-component solution. On the patient side, we have a brain stimulation headset and a behavioral training program. The brain stimulation headset, I will go into what that actually does, but the behavioral training program is basically a program where we teach the patients what depression is, but also how to treat it on their own by changing their behavior. On the clinician side, we have a clinician dashboard. I will also go into what that is, but it's basically a form of dashboard for the clinician in order to follow up on the treatment, monitor the patient, and also change the actual treatment protocol. Let's start with the headset, which is the most innovative part, I would say. So it's a brain stimulation headset that sends a weak current into the what's called the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, so in the front of the brain. And we send in 2.0 milliamps, which is 400 times less current than what you can see in these shock treatments that you do in the hospital. So it's a very, very light current. But we can nevertheless get the neurons on the left side of the frontal part of the brain to get a little bit more activated. It's a very safe method. It's a medical grade device, and we use it in combination with what I mentioned before, the behavioral training program. So In the behavioral training program, we have first activated the brain, given the patient some extra energy in order to be able to change their behavior. And in this program, we teach them how to eat better, how to sleep better, how to perform physical exercise, and how to meditate. So these 4 pillars are delivered to the patient so that they can reduce depression now, but also prevent it from coming back. On the clinician side that I mentioned before, it is a dashboard. The patient is connected to the clinician of their choice. Of course, they have to approve this. The clinician can then follow the patient, see how they are doing, because the patient is filling in a self-questionnaire in the app, so they can see on many different aspects how the patients are doing, from a focus perspective, from a mood perspective, but also from a depression perspective, summed up in depression. And they can also change the treatment protocol. So, for example, if a patient is much more severely depressed, you can increase the amount of stimulation sessions that they have compared to the standardized protocol. A little bit about the results. We started this company back in 2016. We started it based on the knowledge that there were studies coming out showing the brain stimulation techniques to be very effective, roughly on the same level as a normal SSRI, an antidepressant. So we took that data and we ran with it. We built the product. We have since then also been able to deliver a couple of pilots. We actually have 3 pilots that are out, and a very big study, at least in medical device terms, so 210 patients, coming out later this October. But these results, the pilot results, show quite astonishing numbers when it comes to remission and response after 6 weeks of treatments, but also in a follow-up 3 and 6 months later. In addition to that, we have about 7,000 patients that are real-world patients, very difficult to treat, sometimes treatment-resistant patients, but also patients with a lot of comorbidities, so difficult to treat patients. But still, we can see a 44% clinical response at 6 weeks. So this is very interesting. We have then, as I said, followed that up with 2 actually big RCT studies that will be presented quite soon. I think what's interesting here is basically that with the clinician platform, we are able to push out improvements in the same way that, for example, Tesla is doing on their cars. So over-the-air updates, when we know that something is much more powerful for that particular patient, we can push that out to the patient from a software perspective. And last but not least, this solution comes without major side effects. So very easy to combine with something like an antidepressant. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniel, and it's a fantastic presentation. And it's great that you had this slide as the last one, because I would like you to elaborate a bit on what could be achieved if you were to collaborate with a big pharma like Lundbeck or others having antidepressant medicine. Could you elaborate on that? What more could you achieve in a close collaboration?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So I would say that it's really, really interesting to look at the holistic solutions going forward. So we have built the brain stimulation and the behavioral therapy, but why not add on an antidepressant? We know from our real-world data, but also from clinical data in the studies, that adding on an antidepressant gives even better results. It's not like we have reached a ceiling kind of situation on the effect. So given that this has no side effects, if you combine it with an antidepressant, you have an almost perfect solution, maybe at a little bit lower levels, a lower dosage. So you get rid of the side effects from the antidepressants and then combine it with this, but still have the same effect. I think in our discussions with the payers, they see this as a very interesting solution. So we would love to collaborate. We don't see any competition between those solutions.
Brilliant. And with that, and also on Brain Plus answer on big tech, we're living the perfect storm between the health tech companies and the big tech and the big pharma. I leave it over now to you, Nils Christian.
Thank you very much, Krista. And thank you for some really interesting presentations. There's a lot of passion around this topic. As we can see, people really want to share what they have done and their experiences. Now, the panel discussion is for all of the speakers. And I will start by asking Marcus a question, actually. And the question is relevant, I guess, all around the table, but let's start with you. You mentioned in your presentation, Marcus, that 80% of patients want the digital solution. That was from your study, from your work in the neurology department. Do you think the system as a whole, I'm not talking about patient and relatives, but the healthcare systems, the payers and all of that, are they ready for that, for the digital solution?
Honestly saying, the patients are much more ready than the healthcare sector and the hospitals are. So as you all, in all countries, Denmark, Sweden, Finland, we have a bank IDs, we have used online banking already decade. Our tax office has been online 20 years, and the healthcare sector no. So only public instance, which is not digital, is healthcare sector. You do your banking accounts, you do your all other things, police, everything online, but not your healthcare. So what is the difference? So the patients are much more ready, and there is no separation between age groups. COVID changed the whole story, and before COVID, customers and hospital asked, what about the patients and how they are dealing with the care? And now no one asks the patient anymore. And the reason for that one is that now the surgical backlogs are so huge that there is not enough nurses and doctors and how to cope with the amount of patients you have now. And we don't have time to call to everyone, and we have to make contacts with the patients. And digitalization is the only tool to do that. Another thing is that because of lockdowns, not in Sweden or in Finland, but in other countries, the amount of smartphones increased enormously, especially in the older age group, because the grandparents wanted to make contact with the grandchildren and WhatsApp videos. So, like in Spain, Italy, all the old ladies and men bought smartphones to make a contact with the grandchildren. And I haven't seen the official data, but I lived 5 years in Spain and discussed a lot with the local ones that now everyone has smartphone because of lockdown, and you have to make contact with your friends and relatives, and WhatsApp videos is the way. So I'm more concerned that the public sector healthcare cannot fulfill the expectations of the patients. Private sector can in some extent, but the patients are more aware, more ready to use the digital solution than the public healthcare sector can offer them.
Okay. I was wondering, does anybody else in the panel have some additional comments on that?
Yeah, maybe I can add a few things, because I think us as technology providers, if we put a digital health out there, we are creating this potential burden for the GPs and therapists and so on. So when we do that, we need to, one is develop something that makes sense for them. Do not overburden them with a lot of signals from all the wearable devices. Just create a summary and provide alerts, help them make the decision in the moment for that patient. And the second thing is more awareness about digital health and what it means, because the time that the therapist or doctor is spending with the patient on digital, that should be reimbursed. They should be paid for that time. That technical support that you now need to do, because you know how to take a pill, but the app is not connected, it doesn't show anything. You need to provide that support. So where is that time reimbursed? How are they paid for that? So that's also something that we need to make more awareness and collaborate on this, I think.
Yeah, and when we are developing,
just jump in, because Niels was about to say something just before, and I would like to reach the whole, to spread it out amongst the panel. So Niels, you were just about to say something just before.
No, that's fine. I think one of the a good friend of mine actually told me that in the healthcare space, every time you are reminded to do some action on an app or whatever, it's basically the same as reminding you that you are sick or you are different than the rest of the population. So a lot of the kind of I think we need to get to a stage where it's this non-invasive data capture. There needs to be a non-invasive, presence in terms of we capture the biometrics, the signals without the necessary involvement of the patient, but then we proactively push what is the recommendation and not as much we ask them to type things into a phone or whatever. I think when we get to that non-invasive data capture process, we really come a far way, because then you've basically changed the entire setting of the patient and they don't feel as alienated as you would necessarily. So that was my only comment.
Jakob, you were nodding very clearly to what Niels just said. I'm just, there must be something going on in your mind. What were you thinking?
Yeah, I think it's more from a perspective of clinical development and designing protocols and clinical trials. It's been very obvious that in the first couple of years now of this digital health age and trying to push some technologies into trials to gain new insights and get more data, we have focused very much on the science and establishing some solid methods for capturing meaningful data. But now we are really hit by the reality that if we don't consider the user experience or the patient experience, patients won't use our technologies or won't use the sort of the things that we implement in our trial, and then we end up with no data anyway. So this is a really solid argument for really considering those aspects and keep that in mind whenever we use these technologies, either in clinical development or in the clinical care sector.
Okay, yeah. Daniel, if you could ask one question to one of the other panelists, what would that be in relation to what we're discussing here?
Oh, that's an interesting question. If I have any questions, I would probably ask the big providers, AWS and Microsoft. It's a lot of talk about strategy and the big thinking around data collection and so on. Are you planning on going into the treatment space?
Niels, that's for you. I just quickly jump in. Harry had to leave for another meeting, so he's not joining the panel. So it's not because he ran away. He had other things he had to attend to. So Niels?
So the fast question is absolutely not. I think that's our focus is primarily or is solely to bring tools to market that can improve other industries. We've never been our intent to go into the life science industry, the healthcare space, but our strategy as such is to basically empower those industries to use our platforms to build solutions. So we don't as such go into to other business domains. That has been very clear ever since Satya became CEO of Microsoft. It is to empower others to build on top of our platform and to collaborate, I would say.
Okay. Jakob, now I'm going to throw the ball to you. If you could ask a question, not to Niels, he's off the hook now, but to one of the others, what would that be?
I think I would actually like to ask what sort of does some of these health tech providers, now I'm focusing mainly on Marcus, Paula and Daniel, what do you see as the biggest obstacles in terms of working with pharma? What do you see as the biggest hurdle to overcome to sort of get through the first point of contact and actually establish a collaboration? What can we do better on our end, basically?
Well, Marcus, if you start.
Yeah,
and
so
Paula and Daniel, but let's 10-15 seconds, so really short and sweet.
yeah. So we are collaborating with a few pharmaceutical companies, and the big challenge is that their main focus is to sell their medications, and even though they would like to scale up, it's not their interest. So it's the one certain specific medication or disease, and it's hard to scale in a hospital looking for wider solution. And that, okay, we are doing only this niche part of the care, but you have to have other provider for all other processes and care and indications. That's the biggest challenge.
Paula.
Yeah, I have two things. One is seeing the digital health companies more as a partners rather than just providers of some technology, just work on a timely basis. It should be a collaboration. And the other thing I don't think you can change so much about it, but it's the timing of things. Things take a lot of time in pharma, and these smaller companies, they move fast and want to get things done. So that's a challenge in itself to get the right sync on that.
Yeah, and I can just echo the speed part. Just as an example from the VC world, from the investment world, there's very small funds for the seed level investing, very short contracts, get going right away. I think you could apply something similar to that and just say, okay, we're going to run a test with this company, 10, 15, I don't know, 50 patients with our solution very, very quickly, a couple of months. And then if it's not good, it's not good. Everybody goes their own way. That would be amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think in the interest of time, we should wrap up. It has been a pleasure. I believe, Sophia, we have an ending slide. Maybe you could share that. There you are. So, first of all, thanks to all of the speakers for taking the time to put this together with us. Also, thanks to Martin and Krista from Invest in Skåne for doing this for the third time it is now. Special thanks to Sophia, who is the technical wizard behind the screen, who's making all of this happen. Also, a thanks to Sarah Lidé, who was part of this up until 2 weeks ago, when she started New Challenges. But it's been a pleasure working with you as well. So the recording will be sent out, or a link will be sent out for you guys to watch. I believe it will also be available on, you can find it on YouTube, but that will also be in the email. If there are any specific questions, you can reach out to Sophia at the email presented there. And then I think I will conclude on my behalf and Copenhagen Capacity of saying it's been a pleasure. And I look forward to doing something interesting with HealthTech in Medicon Valley in 2023. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.